that, by the way, most people recover from.
But I will say that I've voted against every lockdown that there's been a vote held on the basis that A, I will not criminalise protest, and B, I will not criminalise parents seeing their children and children seeing their parents. It is fundamental. It is as fundamental as that. I will not criminalise parents for seeing their children and children seeing their parents. And when I hear the Secretary of State for Health and others saying, well, you can hug your family at some point in May, it absolutely makes my blood boil. I just cannot, I can't understand what we have done. We have robbed people of their agency. We've robbed people of the ability to make their own decisions. People are anxious and upset and desperate because they don't feel they have any control in their lives. And I'd say this, for the past 2 months, the only place that a group of people can gather together and dissent about their freedoms being removed without fear of arrest is the chamber of the House of Commons. That is not a country I want to live in. And the fact that we have done this. So the only place where voices can be raised collectively is in the House of Commons. If I gathered on the streets with 4 or 5 of my constituents to do it in a peaceful way, I would face arrest. It's shocking. It's utterly shocking.
Deputy Speaker, there is a worrying trend, a worrying narrative emerging, and this is a really good opportunity to get a lot of things on the record as I build an argument in the next 2 minutes, 45 seconds. First of all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am extremely concerned that we are placing severe restrictions on people's liberties without any recourse to Parliament. I would like to have the chance to debate it on the floor of the House, to represent the concerns of my constituents. I'm also concerned, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we go around arresting old men in Trafalgar Square for having a peaceful protest and fining them £10,000. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I never thought I would ever be defending Mr. Corbyn in the chamber of the House of Commons, but I am. I'm defending a Corbyn. We've got to be allowed to protest without fear of arrest and being fined. And now today, we hear that we're going to have the public being urged to inform on their friends and neighbours because grannies followed grandad into a family home of 5. This is a profoundly unconservative thing. All of these things are unconservative, and I do think being asked to put this country, this House, members of this House, our constituents, on the wrong side of the law, before we've exhausted all other options, I'm not going to be voting for this bill at second reading, because if you keep whacking a dog, don't be surprised when it bites you back. We are all members of Parliament and we deserve to be taken seriously. I accept there's a pandemic, a national crisis, but surely that is the time. That is the time when our voices should be heard.
Earlier, and began by asking why he's so furious.
Because we were told that vaccines were the way out of this. We were told when Christmas was cancelled, celebrate your Christmas at Easter. Bring your family together then because the vaccines will allow that. And a lot of people have been holding on through the long winter months, looking forward to that date in Easter. And what the Secretary of State for Transport has done by telling people not even to plan their domestic summer holidays is to suggest unwittingly, or wittingly, I don't know, that perhaps lockdown is going to extend from the spring into the summer and beyond. And that is a terribly irresponsible thing to do, a terribly, terribly irresponsible thing to do with a very stressed out and exhausted nation.
I mean, could it be that actually the irresponsible thing to do was to tell people that things were going to be okay? You know,
No,
and that actually Grant Shapps might be being responsible by telling people, readjust your settings, you know.
No, we can't go on like this. We've got a vaccine. We've got a vaccine with high efficacy. There will always be new variants of coronavirus. That's what coronaviruses do. They evolve, and this will happen year after year after year. The current situation is absolutely not sustainable. It's not sustainable for people's mental health and emotional well-being. It's not sustainable for business. It is not sustainable in any way at all. The government needs to have its feet held to the fire on this. Now, I hope that Grant Shapps was speaking out of turn. I hope it was a mistake. I hope the Prime Minister reins him in. The government is running a deliberate programme to scare people witless. So you've got people who are now frightened to leave their homes in case they get this virus that, by the way, most people recover from. And with a vaccine, will be far less severe than it is now for many people. I'm really sorry, but I'm not getting into this game where somehow a death from coronavirus is different from a death from cancer or death from heart disease. We accept that 20-odd thousand people die from flu every year. We accept that 617,000 people die every year from old age, but somehow you're not allowed to die from coronavirus ever. We cannot cancel life to preserve every life.
What do you think about 10-year jail sentences for lying about where you've been on holiday?
Well, I think most people think it's utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. So I mean, come on.
Does that kind of announcement actually then start undermining confidence in criminal justice?
I mean, it does make the Secretary of State for Health look ridiculous. I mean, it really does. We have all these alpha males running around this issue, just saying the first thing it seems that pops into their head without any thought for the repercussions it's going to have on millions and millions of stressed out people at the end of their tether.
Thanks, Walker. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can't support this legislation tonight. I can't support criminalising a parent for seeing a child in the park over the coming months. It's not within my DNA to do that. But, Mr. Speaker, of course I will follow the law and respect the law. You have the argument in the House of Commons, you divide, you're on the winning side or the losing side, and I will be on the losing side. There is no doubt of that. But I do not wear the fact that I will support the law with great virtue, because it's so easy for me to comply with the law, isn't it? It's so easy for most people in this House to comply with the law. We're comfortably off. We live in nice houses. We have gardens. We have outdoor spaces. We have access to family. The same applies to those journalists who fill our TV screens every night with their wisdom and wit about how people should comply with these regulations and how they sneer at those that can't. Advantages. My advantage of a monthly salary, a monthly pension payment. These are people who are going to be worrying about their jobs, about their future, about their mental health, about their family relationships, sneering and dismissing them, calling them COVID-idiots.
Sir Charles Walker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, in these debates we talk about elderly people as if they're not in the room. We talk over their heads, we patronise them. We say to them, this is being done in your name to keep you safe. And actually, really, your view is of little interest to us. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been contacted by many grandparents and parents who say, Charles, not in my name. I don't want to see my children's future destroyed, my grandchildren's business destroyed. I don't want to see my son and daughter worrying about losing their home, worrying about losing their livelihood. I don't want to see my grandchildren arrested on the streets of London for daring to raise their voice in protest at the removal of their liberties. No government can abolish death. It is impossible. 615,000 people die every year in this country.
What's she done? How many of them were there? Two of them, one of them? One. You're arresting our people for demonstrating right of protest. This is a disgrace. I hope you're ready for... Well, I will do something. I'm a member of Parliament. This is an absolute disgrace. Yeah. This is a disgrace. Yeah. She's an old lady. You don't... It doesn't matter what group she's on. She has a fundamental right to protest. Freedom. You're arresting her. She protects people's freedom. Get me?
We need to talk about this in Parliament, don't we?
It will be talked about in Parliament.
Point of order, Sir Charles Walker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have just witnessed an elderly lady peacefully protesting with a handful of other people be arrested and carried spread eagle to a police van just outside the precinct of the House of Commons. This is a disgrace. This is un-British. It is unconstitutional. And this government Our Prime Minister needs to end these injustices now. Madam Deputy Speaker, will you bring the Prime Minister and or the Home Secretary here today to sort this out? She was an old lady robbed of her dignity for having the courage to protest about having her fundamental rights and those of my constituents and others removed.
He wants the economy to be opened up again, but is it the right time to be doing that?
Well, I hope everybody wants the economy to be opened up again, but they will always argue that it's not the right time, just another 6 months, another 6 months. We have the vaccines. We have the vaccines. We were told they were the way out of this. So we vaccinate the population, but you're still in lockdown. People are going to start scratching their heads and start wondering, what on earth is this all about? What the government is doing now is bordering on the very dangerous, to be perfectly honest, and it is very, very stupid and very, very short-sighted.
Booster jabs in the autumn. Does that suggest that restrictions in one form or another could be a feature of quite a lot of 2021?
Well, it shouldn't mean that, because then when we get to the autumn with booster jabs in autumn, they might say, well, we need booster jabs in February, and then when we get to February, booster jabs in July, and so on and so forth. So this is no reason and no excuse not to open up the economy. We were told vaccination was the route out of lockdown. We've been in lockdown in one form or another for many, many months. Some communities have been in lockdown for the best part of a year. And come February the 22nd, we want to see a route back to normality.
Isn't the problem that the threat of variants, and looking at Bristol, for example, where we have this mutation of the Kent variant, which is highly transmissible and may not be as responsive to a vaccine, that means unlocking, we're going to see those variants become more widespread?
There are always problems. Coronaviruses evolve. That's been known for many decades, if not a century. So none of this should come as news to any scientist, and it shouldn't come as news to the government. It may come as news to the public, but I'm afraid viruses always evolve, which is why we have a different flu vaccine every year, but we don't go into lockdown every year, and we cannot continue the way we're continuing. This is appalling for society. There are huge levels of anxiety and stress. This is an epidemic of mental health problems probably waiting to come round the corner. Some have already arrived. We have an economy to maintain, and I'm afraid this is just not acceptable. I think for the Secretary of State today for Transport to suggest people shouldn't start booking summer holidays, domestic summer holidays, was an extraordinary statement to make and a very irresponsible statement to make.
Well, you describe it as irresponsible, but is the government right to be urging caution at the moment? Because they've been burned, haven't they, by over-optimistic statements last year. Look at Christmas, for example.
Totally irresponsible. Last year, summer holidays went ahead. Caseload was very low. This year, we have a vaccine. We have a vaccine with very high efficacy rates. So I'm afraid there is no excuse. And it seems to me that you're suggesting that we should just be in permanent lockdown, because there will always be new variants of coronavirus coming along. And if that's what you want, well, I'm afraid it's not going to be sustainable. We will go bust, and we will have social unrest. We will have division. People do actually need to see the people that they love. They do need to hug and hold their children. They do need to mix with their friends. They do need to spend time in other people's company. But if you don't think that's important and the government don't think that's important, I think they're going to get a rude awakening when the public decide that they've had enough.